within that service, we're going to launch a new instance. So as you go down here, you can see click instance, or on the main EC2, you see the launch instance option. In the launch instance, it's asking for the name, so we'll just use Jenkins 1 as the name. In terms of the machine image, the AMI, we're going to use Amazon Linux, which is built on basically CentOS, and it's a free tier, so we'll just stick with that as part of the AMI selection. From the instance type perspective, since we're running Jenkins as a purely a lab setup, so internal setup, so we're not concerned with how much CPU or memory this instance has, so we'll just use T2 Micro, again free tier, so don't have to pay extra cost for that. Now key pair, as we spoke earlier, that's the ability used for us to SSH into the instance. So we'll use, you have option of creating a new key pair, or you have an existing one. In this case, there's an existing key pair in this setup, so I'll just use that. Now, from a network setting perspective, we do have to select the appropriate VPC. So we remember created a VPC just for Jenkins. We're going to pick that. It automatically populates the subnet because it's only single subnet as part of the CIDR block, and we're not going to use any IPv6, so don't have to worry about that. Any other details? Now, from a security group perspective, since in this VPC we already have a specific Jenkins specific security group configured, so we'll just pick that Jenkins G01, which allows SSH, HTTP on port 80 and 8080 access into the Jenkins once it's up and running. From a storage perspective, GP2 is SSD storage, so we'll just stick with that. We use that. You can of course increase the storage size. We're not too concerned with that from a lab setup perspective, so we can keep the 8 GB RAM, hard disk on this one, and then we're ready, and go ahead and initiate the launch instance. It shouldn't take very long for the instance to come up. So if we go on our instances, you'll see there's a filter for name Jenkins, and you can see as part of that there's a new instance which is still being instantiated, which is still being launched, and we're not ready for any checks at this moment since it's being launched. It's under is still up and running. It still needs to take time to boot up. So while we wait for that instance to boot up, if we go back to our topology, remember we have to give internet access into this instance. So we already have IGW as part of this VPC, but we need to associate a public IP address, and that is done through Elastic IP, as we mentioned earlier. So let's scroll down under the network settings. Let's allocate a new IP address. There is an existing IP address that is being used, but don't have to worry about that. So what we're saying is to create and allocate an IP address as part of this instance. So very first thing we'll do is to allocate an IP address. If you click on the IP address, what that will show is it's been basically made available, but is it something that we have to let's just look at that once again. So if you click on this IP address, we have to option of assigning this as well, so into an instance. So that is the next thing we need to do, is to assign this IP address to a VM. So it could be on a specific interface, but we just have single interface on this Jenkins 1, so we'll just assign this IP address on that instance, so automatically links the IP on the interface onto the instance. Once that is done, you will note that we'll see the allocation being done, and it's now linked with this specific interface on that instance. So we can go back into our instance, check the Jenkins 1, and as you can see in the Jenkins 1, if you scroll right, you'll note that it has the public IP address now assigned into it. So we can, of course, verify this by simply copying this address, and let me bring the terminal. So if we ping the IP, voila. So because we allowed ICMP on the security group, so that means we should be able to ping that. The other thing is, remember, there's an existing key pair, so we're going to use that key pair to SSH into this instance. Now the default user credentials, user ID that we got to use for accessing the AMI Amazon Linux 2 EC2 user, and we have the public address, IP address, which has been assigned through the Elastic IP. Once that is done, there we go. We can SSH now using the private key pair, and we're going to SSH into the EC2 user credentials into this Elastic IP address, and that gets us into this instance. So that covers part 2 of this video series. Now we have the Jenkins VM or instance up and running. We are able to access into it, and the next step is to install Jenkins on that.